An amateur astronomer, Mark had always been captivated by the mysteries of the cosmos. Their cabin, far from the blinding city lights, was their sanctuary, a place where the stars seemed close enough to touch. The cabin, with its rustic charm, was adorned with constellations, maps and vintage space posters, a testament to Mark's passion. It was here, in this remote corner of the world, that Mark set up their newest acquisition. A powerful second-hand telescope bought from an estate sale. It was an old, yet sophisticated piece, with a charm that seemed to whisper tales of the cosmos. The first few nights were filled with a childlike wonder as Mark explored the night sky, tracing the familiar patterns of stars and the distant glow of other galaxies. They felt an indescribable connection to the universe, a sense of belonging amidst the vastness of space. But as the days passed, their fascination began to take a peculiar turn. Mark started to notice something unusual. It was a clear night when they first saw it. A vague humanoid figure, floating in the void of space. It was barely discernible, a mere shadow against the backdrop of the glittering cosmos. At first, Mark thought it was a trick of light or a flaw in the telescope's lens. But each night, as they returned to that specific region of space, the figure was there, staring back at them, its presence an unexplained anomaly in the serene tapestry of the night sky. This mysterious figure, existing in the vacuum of space itself, beckoned to Mark with an unsettling allure, setting the stage for a journey into obsession and fear. The figure in the telescope became an enigma that consumed Mark's thoughts. Night after night, they would return to the telescope, adjusting the lens with a trembling hand, half in fear, half in anticipation. The figure was always there, an unchanging sentinel in the vast emptiness of space. It was a silhouette, humanoid in shape, yet devoid of discernible features. It seemed to exist outside of time and space, a phantom etched against the cosmos. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, Mark embarked on a frantic search for answers. They scoured astronomy books and online forums, delved into ancient myths about the stars, and consulted with fellow astronomy enthusiasts. But their search was in vain. There was no record, no mention of anything resembling the figure they saw through the telescope. The lack of answers only fueled their obsession further. Sleep became an elusive ghost for Mark. Their nights were spent peering into the depths of space, and their days were a blur of hazy exhaustion and relentless research. Friends began to voice their concerns, noticing the dark circles under Mark's eyes and their increasingly erratic behavior. But Mark wouldn't stop, until they understood what the figure was, and why it appeared to them. The figure, meanwhile, remained an enigmatic presence, a constant in the shifting tapestry of Mark's life. It was a mystery wrapped in the stars, a puzzle that defied understanding. And as the days turned into weeks, Mark began to feel a growing sense of unease, a chilling suspicion that the figure was not just an observer, but something far more sinister. The figure in the telescope became the center of Mark's world. They documented every observation, noting the slightest changes in position and appearance. The cabin walls were soon covered with sketches and notes, creating a tapestry of obsession. The more Mark observed, the more the figure seemed to consume their thoughts, both waking and dreaming. As Mark's search for answers continued fruitlessly, their mental state began to fray. They pored over astrological charts and delved into obscure cosmic theories, but nothing matched the anomaly they observed. Paranoia crept in, whispering dark thoughts. Mark started to feel watched, not just by the figure in the telescope, but by unseen eyes in the forest, in the shadows of the cabin. Then, one fateful night, Mark noticed something chilling. The figure appeared closer, its outline more defined. Its eyes, previously indistinct, now seemed to bore into Mark's soul, following their every movement. This change sparked a new wave of terror in Mark. The figure was no longer a passive observer, it was something alive, something aware. Concern from friends and family reached its peak. They pleaded with Mark to seek help, to abandon this unhealthy fixation. But Mark couldn't. They felt a compulsion to understand, to confront this entity. The phone calls went unanswered, the emails unread. Mark retreated further into isolation, the telescope their only companion in a world that seemed to shrink to the confines of their cabin, and the endless expanse of the night sky. The figure in the telescope was no longer just an anomaly, it was a harbinger of something unknown, a bridge between the known and the unfathomable. And as the nights passed, the boundary between Mark's obsession and reality began to blur, setting the stage for a confrontation with the unknown. The night air was thick with tension as Mark adjusted the telescope with shaking hands. The stars seemed to flicker with a foreboding light, as if they too were aware of the impending climax. Mark's heart pounded in their chest, a relentless drum echoing the fear and anticipation that gripped them. As they peered through the telescope, the figure was there, closer than ever before. Its features, once vague and shadowy, were now terrifyingly clear. It was a grotesque parody of a human, with elongated limbs and a face that was a void of darkness, except for two piercing, luminous eyes. Those eyes held a malevolence that chilled Mark to the bone. For the first time, the figure moved, its limbs unfolding in a disturbing, disjointed manner. It seemed to be reaching out towards Mark, its motion slow but deliberate. Mark's breath caught in their throat, a primal fear rooting them to the spot. The revelation hit Mark like a physical blow. This was no mere astronomical anomaly, no trick of light or imagination. This figure was sentient, its intentions unknown but undoubtedly malevolent. It was as if the void of space itself had come alive, reaching out across the unimaginable distance to touch the very essence of Mark's soul. In that moment, Mark understood the true nature of their obsession. It was not just curiosity that had driven them, but a deeper, more primal connection. They were linked to this entity, bound by a cosmic threat that was as terrifying as it was unbreakable. The figure's eyes seemed to bore into Mark, a silent communication that transcended language. It was a message of dark intent, a promise of something inevitable and inescapable. Mark felt a scream rise in their throat, a sound of both terror and despair. As the figure reached closer, its form blurring the line between reality and nightmare, Mark realized they were standing on the precipice of an abyss. The universe had opened its darkest corner to them, revealing a horror that was beyond understanding, beyond escaping. This was the climax of their journey, a confrontation with an entity that was as old as the stars, and as inexorable as time itself. The encounter left Mark shaken to their core. They stumbled away from the telescope, a sense of dread enveloping them. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Mark decided to abandon the telescope, hoping to sever the connection with the figure and regain some semblance of normality. They covered the telescope with a heavy cloth, as if to shield themselves from the entity's gaze. But the figure was not so easily dismissed. Mark began to notice it in other places, a fleeting shadow in the mirror, a silhouette in the static of the television screen, a whisper in the wind. It was as if the entity had breached the barrier between its realm and Mark's, infesting their reality with its presence. The distinction between hallucination and actuality blurred. Mark's days were filled with a creeping sense of paranoia, every corner of their vision tinged with the fear of seeing those hunting eyes again. The nights were worse, the darkness outside mirrored the darkness that seemed to grow inside Mark, a void where hope and reason were slowly consumed. The isolation Mark had once cherished now became their torment. Friends and family's attempts to reach out were met with silence. Mark was alone, trapped in a cycle of fear and despair, haunted by an entity that seemed to exist both everywhere and nowhere. The figure's intrusion into Mark's life was a constant reminder of the climax on that fateful night. The entity was no longer confined to the distant cosmos, it was here, an ever-present shadow lurking at the edge of Mark's consciousness, a dark whisper in the recesses of their mind. The line between the observer and the observed had been irrevocably blurred, leaving Mark in a state of perpetual unease and terror. In the final chapter of this haunting tale, Mark's life had become a surreal landscape of fear and confusion. The entity, once confined to the distant void of space, now seemed to have infiltrated every aspect of their existence. Mark was no longer sure what was real and what was a product of their fraying sanity. The figure's presence was an omnipresent specter, a reminder of the abyss that had gazed back into them. Despite their attempts to escape, to return to a semblance of normalcy, the entity was always there. It was in the fleeting shadows, the odd reflections, and the moments just before sleep claimed them. The entity had become a part of Mark, a haunting melody that played endlessly in the background of their mind. Mark's once passionate interest in astronomy was now a source of profound terror. The stars no longer held beauty or wonder, only the reminder of the horror that lurked among them. The telescope stood covered in the corner of the room, a symbol of Mark's fall from grace. The story ends with Mark sitting alone in the cabin, the weight of isolation and fear a heavy cloak around them. The entity's true nature remained a mystery, its purpose and origin shrouded in the darkness of space. Was it a figment of Mark's imagination, a manifestation of their isolation and obsession? Or was it something more, a sentient being from the depths of the cosmos, reaching out for reasons unknown? The ambiguity of the entity's existence left Mark in a perpetual state of paranoia and dread. The fear of the unknown, the terror of what might be lurking in the unseen corners of the universe, became a constant companion. The figure was still out there, somewhere in the vast expanse of space, its eyes forever watching, waiting. And Mark, forever haunted by its gaze, was left to wonder if they would ever find peace again. The story concludes, not with answers, but with questions. The entity remains a mystery, its presence a chilling enigma that lingers in the reader's mind. All that is known is that it is still out there, somewhere, in the cold, dark void of space.